It was a legendary escape from a place that was supposed to be inescapable. 55 years ago this month, three men pulled off the impossible, breaking out of Alcatraz.
Alcatraz has always been more than concrete and cold water. It's been a riddle wrapped in razor wire, soaked in fog and legend. For decades, the world has stared at that jagged island in San Francisco Bay, asking the same question: did they make it? Now, in 2025, a new twist has surfaced. One so precise, so calculated, it's turning old assumptions inside out. But don't expect a tidy ending. This isn't about heroes or villains. It's about shadows, science, and a silent night that still echoes with secrets. What really happened beyond those cell walls? And how close have we come, until now, to finally knowing? Inside America's most secure prison, Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, often referred to simply as The Rock, stood as a symbol of the US government's most extreme approach to incarceration. Located on a small island 1.25 miles off the coast of San Francisco, Alcatraz was originally a military fort during the 1850s, before being converted into a federal prison in 1934. Managed by the Federal Bureau of Prisons, it was designed to house inmates deemed too disruptive or dangerous for other facilities. From its inception, Alcatraz was intended to be the end of the line, a maximum security, minimum privilege institution for the most incorrigible offenders. The prison facility itself was a feat of engineering and security. The main cell house, constructed between 1910 and 1912, featured 4 blocks of cells, a dining hall, a hospital, a library, and administrative offices. The cells were small, bare, and built with tool-proof steel bars. Prisoners were counted up to 13 times a day, and the ratio of guards to inmates was the lowest in the nation. Metal detectors, tear gas canisters, and armed guards in elevated gun galleries enhanced security at every turn. Access to privileges like work, visitation, and even talking during meals had to be earned, making daily life both strict and psychologically taxing. With its inmate capacity of about 312, Alcatraz rarely got filled to that total. It accommodated some of the known worst criminals, Al Capone and Machine Gun Kelly. Super maximum offenders were dispatched to D Block, home to the Hole, some isolation cells infamous for inhumane conditions. It was a strictly racial segregation, with no rehabilitation intended, only control. There had been major upgrades in the functioning of the prison during its 29 years in operation, like the introduction of electrified fences, updated locking systems, and renovations to improve security in the 1930s and 40s. Alcatraz was closed down on March 21, 1963, mainly because of the high cost of maintenance and the dilapidated state of the buildings, owing to weakening saltwater corrosion.
And yet, it is this legacy that captures imagination. Today, managed by the National Park Service as a museum, it has more than 1 million yearly visitors. Refurbished areas provide an introduction to what used to be deemed the toughest penitentiary in the United States, a stronghold where the thin lines separating punishment and survival often blurred. Its walls were strong, but its legend was even stronger, until one night changed everything. The myth of the inescapable rock. Alcatraz wasn't just a prison, it was a symbol. Perched on a wind-battered island in San Francisco Bay, it came to represent the final word in American incarceration. Not just a place to serve time, Alcatraz was where the system sent inmates it had given up on. The prison's design, its isolation, and its relentless routines created a legend that escape was not only impossible, but unthinkable. That belief wasn't based on folklore, it was reinforced by statistics. Over its 29 years of operation, no one had ever been confirmed to have escaped. In 14 recorded attempts, most were captured or slain, with a few vanishing into the waters, presumed drowned. The treacherous tides, frigid temperatures, and sheer distance from shore made the bay itself an unbreachable final barrier. To attempt escape was, by most standards, to sign one's death warrant. This image, totally contained, was essential for Alcatraz. It was not just about locking people up, it was about annihilating any idea of escape. Guards, officials, and the public bought into the myth of the Rock being impossible to escape from, and that myth served the prison's power. That power came under stress in June 1962. Sometime between 10:30 and 11 p.m. on June 11, 1962, 3 inmates were to get out of their cells and disappear: Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin. The escape caused an introspection. The moment Alcatraz was said to be outfoxed even once, it was taken off its pedestal. The psychological aftershocks were immediate. Once there had been a fortress, now there was only mystery. But this time, unlike others, the enigma lingered on. Now, the lack of a definite conclusion planted seeds of doubt, then fascination, and finally a tale grander than the prison itself. To this day, the 1962 escape is not merely an event, it is a fulcrum in the mythos of Alcatraz. The question of whether those men lived or died remains a mystery. What is known is that their very disappearance cracked America wide open from a myth she'd carried for decades. That crack in the rock allowed the legend to seep away.
Frank Morris, the genius behind the plan. Frank Lee Morris was far from an average inmate. He was a seasoned criminal with a brilliant mind and a history of escapes. The kind of man Alcatraz was specifically built to contain. Orphaned at age 11 and convicted by 13, Morris spent most of his youth moving between foster homes and institutions. His early life of instability hardened him, but it also sharpened his instincts. With a criminal resume that included armed robbery, substance possession, and multiple successful escape attempts, Morris was transferred to Alcatraz in January 1960 after fleeing the Louisiana State Penitentiary. From the moment he arrived, he was already thinking about how he would leave. Once at Alcatraz, Morris was placed near fellow inmates John and Clarence Anglin, as well as Allen West, all of whom he had previously encountered during time served at other prisons. With their cells side by side, the men could whisper to each other at night, quietly forming what would become one of the most calculated escape teams in history. Morris naturally assumed the role of leader. His intelligence and prior experience escaping prison made him the architect of the plan that would ultimately shake the reputation of Alcatraz to its core. Unlike others who had tried and failed, Morris aimed for flawless execution. The group spent months hacking away at the salt damage of concrete beneath the vents under their sinks. They had stolen metal spoons, discarded saw blades, and homely built a drill powered by a vacuum cleaner to make holes in the deteriorating concrete material. Morris produced papier-mâché grills painted with stuff he stole from the library and maintenance shop to mask their activities. Even the sounds of their drilling have been dealt with. Morris played his accordion during a music hour, using its wheezing sound to cover the noise from the digging activities. There is no improvisation here. Most definitely there is planning, testimony that indeed Morris is tactically brilliant. The very act of breaking free was not merely a prison breakout, but rather a direct challenge to the myth of Alcatraz's invulnerability. By sewing together more than 50 raincoats into a 6 by 14-foot raft and life jackets, using hot steam pipes to seal the hunk of rubber, Morris and the Anglin brothers defied even gravity. They even converted a concertina into a makeshift air pump. They officially supposedly drowned, but no bodies were recovered. And 2013 letter contains some compelling evidence to the contrary. Whether Morris died in the bay or lived a secret life in hiding, his escape was undeniably the cleverest escape in Alcatraz's 30-year history, proving that even the rock could be cracked. The Anglin brothers, John and Clarence Anglin, were more than just 2 inmates serving time. They were brothers, bound by hardship, loyalty, and a relentless desire to be free. Born into a poor farming family in rural Florida, they were part of a large brood of 13 siblings and grew up learning how to survive together. That bond of brotherhood became the foundation of their infamous escape from Alcatraz. Their lives of crime, mostly centered around bank robberies, landed them in the Atlanta Penitentiary, where their repeated escape attempts became such a problem that prison officials finally sent them to Alcatraz, the supposed end of the line for troublemakers. It was at Alcatraz that the Anglins were reunited with Frank Morris, whom they had met in earlier stints behind bars.
the brothers were placed in adjacent cells next to Morris and Alan West, which allowed them to communicate and collaborate covertly. With Morris as the brains of the operation, the Anglin brothers became indispensable hands in the escape effort. Over months, they helped dig holes through decaying concrete, using metal spoons and saw blades. While Morris led the engineering side of the plan, the Anglins worked on logistics and concealment, making papier-mâché vent covers to disguise the holes and gathering materials from their prison labor assignments. That too basically helped them in preparing the escape equipment for their escape. They had also helped Morris prepare the life jackets and one gigantic raft of 6 by 14 feet from more than 50 reused stolen raincoats. The hot steam pipes of the prison sealed rubber, while a modified concertina was used to inflate the raft into an air pump. Important, too, to know the daily activities of the prison and accessible materials through the factory system. But every movement they made was calculated. The course taken was carefully shielded from another well-built illusion, including the iconic dummy heads they helped sculpt from soap, toilet paper, and real hair swept from the barbershop floor. The events that followed their disappearance are among the most fascinating mysteries of American criminal history. Evidence has surfaced supporting the idea of the two brothers having lived even after the 1979 legal pronouncement of their deaths. Besides the 2013 letter claiming they had been hiding, there were alleged Christmas cards from the brothers confiscated and even a 1975 picture that seemed to show them in Brazil. BBC interview prison officers and family reminisced about this incident as shocking and eerily quiet. There were no sounds, no alarm raised by night. If the Anglins survived, they pulled off not just a physical escape, but a psychological one, dimming out of a prison made to be inescapable and out of even history itself. Crafting the illusion. The brilliance of the 1962 Alcatraz escape wasn't just in the digging or raft building, it was in the illusion. One of the key elements that allowed Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers to vanish undetected was the creation of eerily lifelike dummy heads. These decoys were so convincing that they fooled guards doing regular head counts. Sculpted from a bizarre mix of soap, toothpaste, and toilet paper, the heads were carefully molded to resemble sleeping inmates. The escapees painted them in flesh tones using art supplies stolen from the prison maintenance shop and topped them with real human hair swept from the barbershop floor.
These heads weren't just clever, they were critical. During nightly checks, guards didn't physically shake prisoners awake. They simply looked into cells for movement. The dummies, placed on the pillows and partially hidden under blankets, gave off the perfect illusion of slumber. To complete the deception, the escapees bundled clothes and towels beneath the sheets to mimic the shapes of sleeping bodies. The effect was so flawless that it wasn't until the morning roll call the next day that the guards realized something was wrong. By then, the trio had been gone for hours. Deception went beyond the dummy heads and included caverns extending into the walls. The prisoners used cardboard and papier-mâché covers made from torn magazine pages from the prison library to make holes that had been being dug for months. All the while, the prisoners were camouflaging the holes. These fakes resembled the air vent grills at the back of their cells. These false grills blend well into the wall, hiding behind them the escape route, which hails gaping. The guards, peeking into the cells, would just see what would seem to be an absolutely normal sealed vent, where in reality, a tunnel to freedom waited behind. The more remarkable thing about the illusion is its resonance with the larger tradition of psychological warfare behind bars, the art of deception cultivated by desperate men in desperate places. In fact, all over the world, deceptions have aided in imprisonment breaks, from letters smuggled and hollowed-out books to false uniforms sewn from laundry scraps. Yet few will compare to the Alcatraz ruse in terms of detail and showmanship. The FBI agent who worked on the case, Michael Dyke, remarked they didn't just dig out, they rehearsed a performance, indicating that the escape involved the psychological as much as it did the physical. The escapees set a scene that beguiled not only the guards, but the entire prison system. Their cells became a stage that night, and for a few hours, the escapees were actors playing the ghostly role of disappeared. But deception was only the beginning. The
The real escape began beneath the surface. Digging to freedom. The foundation of the Alcatraz escape plan was literally carved into the crumbling infrastructure of the prison. Frank Morris, John and Clarence Anglin, and Alan West exploited a critical vulnerability: salt-damaged concrete behind the air vents beneath their sinks. Over several months, the men slowly chipped away at the weakened material using tools that were as simple as they were ingenious. They stole metal spoons from the dining hall and repurposed discarded saw blades. Even more impressive was their homemade drill, crafted from a vacuum cleaner motor. Bit by bit, night after night, they carved escape tunnels that would open into an unguarded maintenance corridor. What made this feat possible was not brute force, but extreme patience and surgical precision. The men worked carefully to avoid detection, placing cardboard covers and papier-mâché vent grills over the holes during the day. These grills were painted to match the wall using art supplies from the prison library, allowing them to blend in flawlessly with the surroundings. The escapees coordinated their digging to coincide with music hour, a daily period when instruments could be played. Morris's accordion, noisy and wheezy, masked the sounds of scraping and drilling, transforming the cell block into a covert construction zone. Once the holes were large enough to crawl through, the escapees entered the unguarded corridor and went upstairs to an empty upper level of the prison where they built a hidden workshop. Here, they stored materials and worked on other escape elements, the raft and paddles. Entering this section was made easier due to the deteriorating conditions of the prison, which sits on the relics of the former military fortifications.
Some old prisoners and later investigators would recall how the foundational layers of Alcatraz were rotting and breaking up, just giving those few men an edge to work undisturbed in those old-sized maintenance tunnels. One of the most crucial final errands was to access the ventilation shaft at the very top of the block. The men climbed 30 feet using plumbing pipes and pried the vent cover. Then, to avoid suspicion, they molded a false bolt out of soap and sealed the grate. Yet another instance of spare detail. By the time the escapees made their move, they had literally worked an intricate path from their cells to the roof. Their strategy concerned much more than just getting out. It was using the prison's own overlooked weaknesses, its age and design, against it. And having done so, they managed what nobody else was able to do: an undetected, almost surgical, tight escape route out of the rock, the raincoat raft and the icy bay. With their escape tunnel complete and the prison's upper levels successfully navigated, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers still faced their most daunting obstacle: the icy, unforgiving waters of San Francisco Bay. Temperatures hovered between 50 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and the currents were notoriously strong. It was these very conditions that had long cemented Alcatraz's reputation as inescapable. But Morris and the Anglins weren't just breaking out of a cell, they were escaping an island fortress. To do it, they had crafted a homemade raft and life vests using over 50 stolen raincoats, a feat of prison engineering that demonstrated just how far their determination reached. The raft itself measured approximately 6 by 14 feet and was constructed in a makeshift workshop the escapees had set up above the cell block. The raincoats were stitched together using thread taken from the prison's work areas, and the seams were sealed by melting rubber with steam pipes found within the prison's plumbing system. To inflate the raft, they converted a concertina, similar to a small accordion, into a makeshift air pump. Even the paddles were homemade, fashioned from bits of plywood, likely salvaged during their work duties. Everything they needed to challenge the bay had been hidden in plain sight. After months of meticulous planning, the trio was finally at the northeastern shore of the island on the night of June 11, 1962. There, they inflated and launched the raft into the darkness, welcoming the chance to travel to the distant, under 2 mile away Angel Island. While the escape went silent until the next morning, it slowly gave away clues about its journey. A paddle was uncovered by the Coast Guard on June 14th. On the same day, a sealed parcel containing the Anglin brothers' personal effects was found. 1 week later, pieces of the raft drifted ashore by the Golden Gate Bridge, followed by a homemade life vest. However, these materials have failed to produce a trace of the men. Numerous officials, such as the prison warden, continued to be convinced that the escapees had drowned. You hear the wind, don't you? And do you see the water? Asked then Warden Richard Willard in a BBC interview.
Do you think you could make it? Chambers believed, however, that the sophistication of the raft and precision of the escapees led to the conclusion that they might have survived. Subsequent scientific analyses had further indicated that if at all the escape were launched during a narrow tidal window, such an escape could be successful. Whether the bay swallowed them or they made it to freedom, the raincoat raft remains the most innovative symbol of defiance against the most secure prison America had ever built. Allen West, the man left behind. Allen West was originally one of the 4 inmates who helped plan the great Alcatraz escape, but he ultimately never made it out. A longtime prisoner at Alcatraz since 1957, West had known Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers from previous prison stints, and their shared time in neighboring cells allowed them to hatch the plan together. West was involved in every stage, chiseling through the weakened wall behind his sink, helping gather materials for the raft and dummy heads, and contributing to the construction of the escape route. But on the critical night of June 11, 1962, West couldn't break through the last bit of concrete in time. According to his own confession, West's tunnel was just too narrow. He had miscalculated the size or failed to fully remove the last section of cement. As he struggled to widen the opening in a panic, the others couldn't wait any longer. With time ticking and dawn approaching, Morris and the Anglin brothers proceeded without him. West remained in his cell, fully aware that his once-in-a-lifetime opportunity was slipping away. His fate was sealed not by fear, but by the smallest of physical obstacles, the last few inches of crumbling concrete that just wouldn't give. The next morning, the guards found that an escape had taken place, and immediately thereafter, West cooperated with law enforcement officials. He provided a detailed description of the escape scheme, outlining the path to the utility corridor, the route over the rooftop, and their intended endpoint, Angel Island. His testimony became the basis for the subsequent manhunt. According to the BBC, it led West to point to evidence such as a paddle and belongings belonging to the Anglins. However, none of the escapees were ever found, which gave rise to suspicions that they had the presence of West in mind during their escape and had changed their route so as to prevent capture if he talked. Allen West had to carry the burden of a plan nearly implemented. While he escaped the risk of freezing to death in the treacherous waters, he forfeited the opportunity of escaping to freedom. Following the foiled escape attempt, West was processed when Alcatraz closed its doors in 1963 and completed its sentence. While often overshadowed by those who seemed to vanish, his role was central in the escape and providing the most complete insider account of it. In the mythic narrative of Alcatraz, West stands as a witness on Earth to a flight that just might have succeeded. A chilling confession or clever hoax? In 2013, more than 50 years after the escape that stunned the world, a new twist reignited interest in the Alcatraz mystery. A letter, allegedly written by John Anglin, was sent to the San Francisco Police Department. It read, "I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962. Yes, we all made it that night, but barely." The letter claimed that Frank Morris had died in 2005, Clarence Anglin in 2008, and that John himself was terminally ill and willing to negotiate his surrender in exchange for medical treatment. The message sparked a new wave of speculation and prompted law enforcement to take a closer look at the case that had been considered closed for decades. The FBI quietly launched a renewed investigation. The letter underwent forensic scrutiny, handwriting analysis, fingerprint, and DNA testing were conducted to determine whether the confession could be legitimate. Yet despite the effort, the results were inconclusive. The handwriting didn't match definitively with known samples from the Anglins or Morris, and no usable DNA or fingerprints could be confirmed.
This ambiguity left the case suspended between belief and doubt. The letter was credible enough to suggest it could be real, but lacked the hard evidence necessary to prove its authenticity. The general populace remained ignorant of the letter's existence until 2018, when the story was broken by local CBS affiliate KPIX. The timing and contents of the letter, along with decades of alleged sightings and family claims, provided introductory oxygen to a mystery that will not die. Even prior to the letter's surfacing, the Anglin family claimed to have received Christmas cards from the brothers,
And there was a much-debated 1975 photograph allegedly showing John and Clarence in Brazil. The text of the letter, with its chilling reference to surviving, traveling across states, and living a quiet life in hiding, could perhaps be the most compelling evidence yet that the escape may have worked. The U.S. Marshals Service, technically still holding the case, has left all doors open. Only recently, in 2022, did it come out with new age-progressed renditions of how Morris and the Anglin brothers might look today, with public appeals for possible new leads. Some investigators and officials remain convinced that the men died in the bay, but others think there are just too many unanswered questions for the case to be considered closed. Whether true confession or elaborate hoax, the 2013 letter underlines tomes of the Alcatraz legend, and probably has brought us closer to the truth than any letter ever had. Particularly riveting about the 2013 letter is how it integrates into a larger cultural fascination surrounding vanished criminals and unsolved myths. In our time of maximum surveillance, near absolute digital footprints, and mostly low public interest, it seems almost mythological that 3 men might have disappeared after committing a crime, blending into the shadows for decades, so to speak. The aforementioned evokes romanticized legends of many D.B. Cooper. Why not Billy the Kid, criminals turned popular culture folk? An old adage, when the underdog could beat the system, people love a good mystery, quotes Michael Dyke, a former U.S. Marshal, during one of his interviews in 2016. This attraction is not only because of the theory that these men might have survived, it also speaks to the very philosophy of a few rotten cracks in an otherwise rigid institution where a slip of freedom remains possible. Just when the trails seemed cold, science found something the myths never could. Science versus skepticism. For decades, the prevailing belief held by prison authorities and federal investigators was that Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers didn't survive their escape attempt from Alcatraz. The cold, swift waters of San Francisco Bay were seen as an impenetrable natural barrier. Warden Richard Willard echoed this sentiment during a 1964 BBC interview, asking pointedly, "Do you think you could make it?" Like many at the time, he believed that even if the men had managed to leave the island, the water would have claimed them. It was this belief that supported the FBI's decision to close the case in 1979, declaring the escapees legally dead. But in the decades since, that hard line has been increasingly challenged by science. In 2014, a group of Dutch researchers used advanced computer modeling to reconstruct the tidal conditions of the night of June 11, 1962. They found that if the escapees launched their raft between 11 p.m. and midnight, a window that coincides with the estimated time of departure, they could have been carried by the currents toward Angel Island. This simulation contradicted the long-standing narrative that the waters were insurmountable, offering a feasible survival scenario if the men were precise in their timing. The scientific leap rekindled interest and cast fresh light on decades of rumors and supposed sightings. In the wake of the findings from the Dutch study, the 2013 letter claiming the men survived and lived reclusive lives gained fresh traction. Together with evidence discovered, the recovered paddle and its personal effects, as well as bits of the raft, it was now plausible that the men might have reached shore alive. Not even the escape was physically possible. It might have worked if executed with the level of detail the men displayed throughout the rest of their plan. As evidence and science mount behind the case, however, to the U.S. Marshals' discredit, they have determined that a convict like Morris and the Anglins would have altogether vanished into quiet, law-abiding lives. Nevertheless, the file remains open. As recently as 2022, updated age-progressed photographs were released of the 3, which implies that law enforcement has not quite thrown in the towel at finding the fugitives. Science may have found the true or incomparably real hidden under that fact. The escape from Alcatraz stands as one of America's most fascinating unsolved mysteries, a tale where fact and possibility still wrestle for dominance. In addition to tide charts and forensic reconstructions, the old curiosity about the Alcatraz escape is something much deeper in American culture, a national obsession with outsmarting the system. From books to Hollywood films like Escape from Alcatraz in 1979, the story has been mythologized not as a prison break, but as a tale of human ingenuity over institutional power. Think they made it out alive? Or did the Bay claim them for good?
Let us know your theory in the comments below. If you enjoyed the mystery, give this video a like, hit subscribe for more true crime and history deep dives, and don't forget to tap the bell so you never miss what's next. Now check out the next video on your screen. You won't believe what was uncovered there.